They dragged her into the wilderness. Some wanted to kill her. Others saw value in keeping her alive. But Fanny had one thought burning through the terror: survive, whatever it takes. For 5 months, she walked the razor's edge, obeying her captors while plotting her escape. She learned their language. She memorized the land. And when the moment came, she ran straight into the unknown, knowing the penalty if caught was worse than death. This is not a legend. This is the story of Fanny Kelly, the woman who outlasted the Sioux. If you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe. I pour my heart into these videos, and with your support, reaching 1,000 subscribers could help me do this full-time. Now, let's step into the chilling story of Fanny Kelly and how she escaped the Sioux Indians. The Great Plains stretched endlessly under a merciless sun. Fanny Kelly shielded her eyes against the glare, her wagon creaking along the Oregon Trail. Beside her, 7-year-old Mary hummed a hymn, unaware of the shadows moving along the ridgeline. They'd been watching for hours, waiting. The Sioux warriors didn't make a sound as they closed in. The first arrow took the lead rider through the throat. Then the world exploded in screams and gunpowder. Fanny barely had time to grab Mary before a war-painted warrior yanked her from the wagon. She hit the dirt hard, her vision swimming as moccasins surrounded her. One wrong move, and the hatchets would finish what the arrows started. Through the dust and blood, Fanny saw Mary being dragged away by a laughing brave. Her mother's heart shattered as her daughter's screams faded into the prairie wind. A club came down and everything went black. When she awoke, the stars were alien overhead. The smell of burning sage stung her nose. Rough hands forced her to sit up as warriors argued in guttural Lakota. One drew his knife and pressed the cold blade against her throat. Fanny didn't breathe, didn't blink. Then laughter. The knife withdrew. She wasn't to die today, but what came next was worse than death. Stripped of her pioneer dress, given ragged skins to wear, Fanny became Wasatch Iank, the running white woman. A slave, plaything. Some nights she was forced to dance for their amusement. Others, she lay frozen in her teepee, listening to warriors debate whether to trade her or scalp her. Yet in the darkness, Fanny studied them, learned which warriors feared their chief's wrath, noticed which horses were always saddled, memorized the paths to the nearest forts. And when the autumn moon waned, she made her choice: better to die free than live as property. The night she ran, the prairie swallowed her whole. No food, no water, just the howl of coyotes and the certain knowledge that if caught, she'd burn alive. Yet still she ran toward the faint hope of soldiers, toward the ghost of the woman she used to be. Dawn broke over the Sioux encampment, painting the buffalo skin teepees in blood-red light. Fanny stirred from fitful sleep, her body aching from the unyielding ground. The smell of burning sage and roasting meat filled the air, a cruel contrast to the gnawing hunger in her belly. She would not be fed today, not until she proved useful. A warrior kicked open the flap of her teepee, silhouetted against the morning sun. Without a word, he threw a pile of fresh hides at her feet. The message was clear: tan these or starve. Fanny's soft pioneer hands, accustomed to needlework and baking, now bled as she scraped flesh from buffalo skin with a dull bone tool. The women of the tribe watched with cold eyes, laughing when she faltered. But Fanny was learning. She noticed how the eldest wife of the war chief moved with quiet authority, how the younger brides competed for status. This was a world within a world, a hierarchy as complex as any Boston drawing room, but with stakes measured in survival. One misstep could mean a beating. A defiant look might earn her a knife in the dark. At night, when the drums pounded and the firelight danced on painted faces, Fanny was dragged into the circle. "Dance, Wasatch," they dem. She allowed herself to weep silently into the mangy buffalo robe that served as her bed. Andied. Her stiff European movements sent warriors into fits of laughter, but she forced herself to sway, to shuffle, to play the fool if it kept her alive, all while searching the shadows for any sign of Mary. Then came the day she heard the news that turned her blood to ice. A trading party returned with whiskey and bullets, and stories of a blue-eyed child sold to the Cheyenne. Fanny's hands stilled on the hide she was working. That night, for the first time, But tears, she realized, were a luxury she couldn't afford. The next morning, when assigned to gather firewood at the forest's edge, Fanny did something reckless. She met the eyes of a teenage Sioux girl who'd been kind to her and whispered in broken Lakota, "How far to the soldier fort?" The girl's eyes widened in fear. She spat at Fanny's feet and hurried away. That evening, the war chief summoned her. His face was unreadable as he sharpened his knife by the fire. "You try to run," he said in slow, heavy English. "We catch. Then we take your fingers, then your tongue, then your skin, piece by piece." He held the blade to the firelight, letting the implication hang in the smoky air. Fanny bowed her head in apparent submission, but behind her lowered eyelids, a plan was forming. If they watched the woods, she'd head for the river. If they guarded the river, she'd wait for the chaos of a buffalo hunt. And if death came, at least it would be on her terms. The moon waned. The camp grew restless with rumors of approaching soldiers. And Fanny Kelly, the educated preacher's daughter from Tennessee, began her transformation into someone far more dangerous. A woman with nothing left to lose. The night smelled of coming rain. Fanny lay motionless in her teepee, listening to the slowing cadence of the camp settling into drunken sleep. The celebration had lasted for hours. The warriors gorged on fresh buffalo meat, their bellies full of stolen whiskey. This was her moment. The knife she'd stolen months ago, hidden beneath a loose rock near the latrine pit, burned against her thigh as she counted the gaps between the sentry's footsteps. When the third watchman passed, Fanny moved like shadow. The buffalo robe she'd carefully frayed over weeks unraveled into strips as she tied them together, her fingers working with desperate precision. Every knot was a prayer. Every breath was a gamble. Outside, a drunken warrior stumbled past her teepee, singing off-key. She froze, the knife handle slick in her palm, ready to fight if discovered, ready to die before being dragged back. The storm broke just as she slipped beneath the tent flap. Rain lashed her face like divine punishment as she crawled through the mud, inch by agonizing inch. The compound reeked of wet ash and horse piss. 20 yards to the pony pen, 30 to the tree line. Every muscle screamed to run, but speed meant death. She'd learned that from watching jackrabbits caught by the camp dogs. Then disaster. A child's wail pierced the night. Fanny flattened herself against a rotting log as a Sioux woman emerged from a nearby teepee, crooning to her sick infant. The woman's eyes swept the darkness. For 3 heartbeats, the world hung suspended. Then she turned away. Fanny didn't breathe again until she'd reached the scraggly ponies at the edge of camp. The paint mare she'd secretly fed scraps to for weeks nuzzled her hand. No saddle, no bridle, just a strip of buffalo hide looped around its jaw. Fanny swung onto its back as thunder drowned out the pony's startled whinny. Then they were moving, first at a walk, then a trot, then a full gallop as the tree line swallowed them whole. Behind her, the first alarm cries went up. Torches flared to life like angry stars. The pony stumbled on a rain-slick root, nearly sending them both crashing down an embankment. Fanny clung to its mane, her stolen knife now between her teeth, tasting blood and iron and freedom. She rode all night by lightning flashes, the storm her only ally. By dawn, her thighs were raw meat. By noon, her lips cracked from thirst. But when she crested the ridge and saw the distant smudge of chimney smoke from Fort Laramie, Fanny Kelly did something she hadn't done since her capture. She laughed. A broken, wild sound that startled a hawk from its perch. The laughter died in her throat when she heard the war drums. They'd sent trackers. They were coming. And the fort was still a day's ride away. The drumbeats grew louder, closer. Fanny's stolen pony stumbled, its flanks heaving. She'd ridden the poor creature half to death. Behind her, a war cry echoed through the canyon walls. They'd found her trail. Ahead, the Platte River raged, swollen with spring melt. The fort lay on the far bank, so close she could see the flag snapping in the wind. But between her and salvation, 200 yards of churning, ice-cold death. Fanny slid from the exhausted pony, her waterlogged boots sinking into the mud. The first arrow struck the tree beside her head with a sickening thunk. No time to think. No time to pray. She waded in. The current grabbed her like a living thing. Freezing water stole her breath as she fought for every inch. Her skirts became anchors, dragging her down. The knife, her only weapon, slipped from her belt and vanished into the depths. Halfway across, her strength failed. The river rolled her under. Darkness, silence. Then, her head broke the surface with a gasp. She'd washed up on a sandbar, her fingers clawing at the gravel. Another arrow hissed overhead. The warriors had reached the bank now, screaming curses. One began stripping off his leggings to follow. With the last of her strength, Fanny plunged back into the torrent. The current carried her, spinning her like a leaf until her knees scraped the far shore. She crawled onto the rocks, vomiting river water, her body shaking violently. A gunshot cracked the air, then another. Fanny looked up through dripping hair to see a squad of blue-coated soldiers charging down the bank, rifles smoking. The Sioux tracker retreated into the water as bullets kicked up spray around him. Strong hands lifted Fanny, a wool army coat wrapped around her shoulders. But as they carried her toward the fort, she twisted in their grip for one last look across the river. There, on the far bank, stood the war chief who'd owned her. Even at this distance, she could feel his promise in the air between them. This wasn't over. Then the fort gates clanged shut behind her, and Fanny Kelly's 5 months in hell had ended. 7 years later, that fury would become a book. And when the Indian commissioner summoned Fanny to a council of Sioux leaders in 1871, she arrived with published copies stacked in her arms. The meeting lodge fell silent when she entered. Before her sat aging warriors, some who'd raided her wagon train, others who'd ignored her pleas for news of Mary. Fanny placed her memoir on the treaty table with a thud that echoed like a gunshot. She spoke in perfect Lakota. "You took my child, you took my life, but you will not take the truth." Then she flipped open the book to an illustration of Mary's tear-streaked face during their last moment together. The warriors shifted uncomfortably. One old man reached out to touch the page, then drew back his hand as if burned. Outside, a blizzard howled. Inside, something unexpected happened. A Sioux woman, perhaps someone who'd lost her own child to the cavalry, began to weep. Then another, until finally, the war chief who'd once held a knife to Fanny's throat spoke. "The Wasatch woman's heart is strong. We will not forget her daughter." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't justice. But as Fanny Kelly stepped back into the storm, her breath forming ghosts in the freezing air, she carried something new: the weight of survival and the terrible freedom of a story told. Fanny Kelly's 1871 memoir became one of the most influential captivity narratives in American history. She lived until 1904, but never stopped searching for Mary's remains.